Heritage University presents Financing Options for Your Association. Good evening. My name is Melissa Rogers, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Heritage Property Management. And we are so excited that you are here joining us this evening. Tonight's class is going to be covering the loan process for your association and potentially some other revenue opportunities for consideration. And tonight's class is going to be taught by our very own Vice President of Accounting and Finance, Sharon Moschel. We are so thrilled that she's going to be joining us this evening. So as for you that you have joined before, we sincerely thank you for returning. And for those of you that are brand new joining us, tonight we are going to go through a quick presentation and have a Q&A session towards the very end where you'll be able to ask questions to Sharon directly, and hopefully we can get those answered for you. So while she goes throughout the presentation this evening, in the upper right-hand corner, there is going to be a Q&A section where you can go ahead and drop your questions as you have them. And again, she will go ahead and answer those as soon as she is finished with her presentation. And as a gentle reminder, we are going to be talking about the process in total. We are not going to be reviewing any association specific scenarios. We're just going to be talking in totality, if you will, of this process and what you can expect. So we do ask that those questions that you may have, please consult your community manager if you are professionally managed, your finance person also if you are not, and your association's attorney if you have any additional questions specifically related to your association. So without further ado, I introduce you to Sharon Moschel.
Oh, hi. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sharon, as Melissa introduced. I run the accounting department here at Heritage. And I'm just going to talk to you tonight about some hard cash. Wanted to give you a little bit of background on association accounting and associations. They operate on cash. That's it. I know you need some cash, and that's important. Your assessments that are coming in are basically the only income that you have. So I know some other opportunities that we have to make some income. We're going to go over some of those tonight, but basically we want to see if a loan is good for you. So Josh, can you go to the next slide? Need some cash. There are lots of options. Whoops, there we go. There are options. There's some good and some not so good. So you first need to determine when you're looking at your association and you're going through a process and you're saying, hey, board, hey, guys, we need some more money. You need to determine if you've got a cash flow problem or you just need a lot of cash at once. And if you're not sure, let's go through a couple of scenarios. Next. Next one, there we go. Scenario. Is your association, there you go. Is your association in need of immediate, excuse me, sorry, I'm on the wrong one. Is your associate, I can't read it because I'm having to get on my phone. My apologies, guys. Okay. My apologies, I'm having to start all over. Okay. Like I said, you need to determine, first of all, do we have a cash flow problem or we just need some cash at one time? Our first scenario is the most common. Is your association just needed of a large amount of money to pay for some needed projects that come about all at once? And some of these examples would be like the roofs or some pool renovations, some paving scenarios that you have in your community. And what the challenge has been over the years is that the assessments have been too low. All right. And your reserves are low. And it comes to a point, though, where you're spending more on repairs than you are on just actually replacing the asset. So you may need more cash all at one time to handle this expense. Another scenario that you might find your association in is, are you in need just of immediate funding for an emergency or mandated repairs that have come about? This is common, believe it or not. We've got some busted pipes, detention pond requirements and overhaul. You're healthy, but you just don't have enough money right now. The challenge here was totally unplanned and off the radar. I mean, you didn't know this was coming. The reserves are actually too low to pay for it, and you really perhaps don't want to wipe out your reserves to pay for these type of expenditures. So, and then the third scenario, do you have low or no reserves and you're finding it difficult to actually keep up with your normal expenses? This is a scenario like you're really missing maybe a reserve study and your assessments are too low to accommodate your needs. And the fourth scenario is your delinquency high. All right, so you're dipping into reserves to meet repair needs and or renovations. And the challenge here is that you may have or you may not have a collection policy, but you need to be executing a stronger effort on collections of those delinquencies. So if you're looking at some of those scenarios and going through them, this is what you want to look at and have a discussion with your board. So where and how do I get some additional funds? Well, first of all, bake sale is definitely not the. Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you. Move. Bake sale is not the answer for sure, because you need a lot of money and you're not going to get it. There's actually very limited income revenues that you can bring cash into the association. One of them, though, is looking at some of your investments that you do have in reserve. You want to make sure you're going to get a higher rate of return, but it is taxable interest on these CDs. You might have some clubhouse rentals. You might even have some property lease usages like movie sets. We've had some associations get money from there. We also have associations that are now starting to have initiation fees for new home buyers so that they can build up some of that capital. Increased assets and reserve contribution. That's a given. Every year we need to increase our assessments to cover the additional expenses. Increase our collection efforts. As I said before, you can reduce your overall spending. You might need a special assessment or perhaps a loan, and that's what we're going to talk about. Melissa will be sending out to you another PDF document that will have some other avenues to make money or actually to save some money that she has come up with. So she'll be sending that out along, and you'll have a copy of the presentation and along with that as well for you to go over. But perhaps a loan is the right answer for you. Let's check it out and see what happens. So if you fall in scenario number 1 or 2, remember that was just we need some cash right now. Then, or if you're going to fall into scenario 3 or 4, you're going to have limited choices. Okay. So if you're scenario 3 or 4 with low reserves and high delinquency, you're going to have some additional challenges in getting some cash into your community. But like I said, if you fall into scenario 1 or 2, a loan might be the option for you. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about tonight. See if this is the right option. So, loan or no loan? Is your association financially healthy? Okay. Have you funded the reserves? Is your delinquency low? Which is very, very important. The bank will not loan money if the delinquency is higher than 5 to 8% max, and that does vary by bank and by the loan amount. And if you try to figure that out, that's going to be your first key to whether you can get a loan or not, is you've got to have the low delinquency. So if you take your number of um, homeowners or unit owners and you multiply it by 5% or 8%, that's the maximum number of delinquencies that you can have. So if you're a good go, if you're healthy financials, you've got funded reserves, your delinquency is low, you are ready to go. That's a go for a loan. Let me talk about the delinquency. The next slide, please. Yeah. This is very important. And one of the reasons why people sometimes want the board or looking to get a loan is because their delinquency is so low. People aren't paying enough in to get the work done that needs to be done around the community. But it's very important because if a homeowner is not paying their regular assessment, so they're being delinquent, they're more than likely not going to pay any special assessment or any increase that you may have on your assessments to pay the loan. Okay, so you're going to have to budget accordingly if the association will need to be able to fund their portion of the loan payments, be able to budget for that. So that's a big, big, big key. So I would say your delinquency, looking at your delinquency, getting your delinquency cleaned up is the very first step into trying to get a loan. Next slide. Now, what do you need to do to be healthy? All right. We all want to have a healthy association, just like we always want to have a healthy checkbook at home. In order to be healthy, you just need a large sum of cash in the short time frame, and you have low delinquencies, but you do have some adequate reserves. Okay, you don't want to use up all the reserves. You may not have enough reserves, but you do have adequate reserves. The adequate reserves helps make any loan payments from the delinquencies. So you're healthy if you're able to pay your bills, you got a positive cash flow, you're able to put some money in savings, but you need some right away. That is what we consider a healthy community. So let me talk about the loan itself. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. These loans that we get from the bank are considered unsecured loans. We have a clubhouse. We think it's valued a lot of money, but guess what? It's not. It's not a taxable asset. All of these loans, there is no property put up, and majority of the banks do not require CD or extra cash, at least the ones I work with. So the loans at the bank that the bank provides is a what they call a right of receivership if there's a default. In other words, if you don't make the loan payments or you cannot make the loan payments, they have a right to go and secure all of the future assessments. Now, they're not in business to manage your association. They don't really want to do that, and they'll probably refinance the loan to a loan shark. Um, and that can happen. I've seen it. So you really want to be conscious of making sure that we can make the loan payment. Not all banks will do a loan. That's another one. We have to go to a bank that'll do associations. We have several sources that we can source out that do that because um, association is actually doing business with association banks, and so they know how to. It's all structured. Okay, next slide. Okay, so let's determine that you are healthy. Your reserves are pretty tight. You've got some reserves. We don't know if they're going to be quite enough. Everything's good. I've got to have this money. The roof is just repairs are off the wall. It'll be a lot better to replace the roof than to keep having to spend money on these repairs. So we need some cash. So the first thing you want to do is get a loan rate proposal. So we send these proposals to the bank. It's not a guarantee they're going to loan you the money, but they're what they're going to do is provide you the interest rate, and you can request the terms. So when you want to get a loan rate proposal, then what we need to know is how much loan is the loan for. We need to know the terms. What were you thinking? We can ask when we go to get a proposal. We can say, well, what would be the rate for a 7 or 10? 10 years is the max. And then they have to know what the purpose of the loan is. We can't just say a loan for general repairs. It needs to be specific. And so that we come along and have, that it's going to be for roofs and it's going to be for painting and siding or, something specific. And when you get that money, specifically that the expenditures need to be paid for what you indicated with the purpose of the loan. And then you have to decide, will the loan payments be coming from your budget? Can you afford just to make in your regular operating expenses? Or are we going to have to do a special assessment? Okay. And the other thing that they always, of course, will ask for are current financials. They want to know how healthy you are. So those are the first things we do. They come back and say, okay, the loan interest rates have gone down. We're looking right about 6% right now. And then you say, oh, that's great. Okay, well, I think we can work within that. So let's talk about what the next steps will be. Next one, Josh. Assessments or special assessment. So you're going to need to determine, and this is all individual. There's no set pattern. There's no set rules. You know your community more, but I will work with you in determining if you can afford it from your budget or how we would set up a special assessment. If you've determined your association needs a loan, great. But how will the loan be paid back? Like I said before, it's in the budget, or you'll have to have a special assessment. So the main thing too is, oh, next, Josh. There we go. The main thing now, you're going to have to get the buy-in from your homeowners. Okay, you need to do a presentation, educating the homeowners, and this is going to be very, very important and very key to getting the buy-in. Everybody, they may know we need roofs, but they don't understand the extent of the roofs. They don't understand what the cost is going to be. You need to have a special meeting. You might want to, if it's some other major projects, you might want to have the project manager attend to go over it. If say you're having to replace some stucco or things of this nature, you want to actually offer the homeowners an opportunity to ask, questions about this. How am I going to pay for it? How long is it going to take? What happens if I sell my place? Am I still responsible for the loan? Do the new owners pay for the loan? You have to provide financing options. One of the key, I think, key points to make to the homeowners is everybody is responsible for this expense. Okay. Well, if you're getting a new roof, just like an individual homeowner has to get a roof, you're in a condo, then everybody's got to be pay their fair share of the roof. And so sometimes we can collect the money up front and you don't have to have the loan. But other times you might need to have some other financing options. So each homeowner needs to know how much of the project they are responsible for. And this is shared. All right, next. All right, so keep in mind each homeowner pays their equal share of the income and expenses. And like I mentioned, you may get payments up front before a loan is even closed, thus needing to borrow less. Let me give you a good example of this. Say you're each homeowner, they're getting roofs in the whole entire community. Each homeowner needs to pay $5,000 for these roofs. Okay, you give them an opportunity to pay that 5,000 up front, and that'll create less money that you have to pay to finance on a loan, right? And so those who cannot pay up front, they would actually be the ones that are responsible for paying the loan payment. It saves a lot of money in the long run. And you'd be surprised some homeowners would prefer that option. So educating the homeowner is very key. If your association is assessed monthly, then your special assessment is monthly, and it can be quarterly, semi-annual, or annual if you're not a monthly. All right, next. There we go. Loan process. So all of that is good. We've got our proposal. We've met with all the homeowners. We've got our proposal from what the cost is going to be, of course, for the projects. The next item is actually the loan process. And this process can take up to a couple of weeks to a couple of months, actually. depending upon how much you're borrowing and all the information that they need. Some banks have a quick loan; they can get some money very quickly if you have an emergency. And some, if it's like $1 or $2 million loan, then there's a lot more data, requested information. So in general, the following types of things are items that are requested. They want the financials, of course, multiple years. Okay, so we may be cleaning up our AR, we may be looking at some good expenses now, but they want a couple of years to see the differences. Of course, they have to have their articles of incorporation. You are a corporation, that all assessments, I mean, all associations are. They want a copy of a current reserve study. A current could be a couple of years old, but that's pretty current. If you're going to have a special assessment, they're going to need the special assessment meeting notes and voting records, exactly of who voted yes and who voted no, and all of those details. Of course, they need the bids and proposals. They need your current budget. They need next year's budget. Right now, I'm working on loans. They're looking for next year's budget. They're want a listing of all the homeowners. You have to have a collection policy. Other items they may specifically ask for based upon the amount. Minimum of two board members will sign the application. And then the final loan documents are also signed by the board, and Social Security numbers are needed. So one of the common questions I get too is that when a board signs this, they are not liable for this individually, and it never goes against somebody's credit report or any of that type of thing. You are signing on behalf of the association. Next one, Josh. Thank you. Timing. Underwriting can take, like I mentioned, anywhere from 2 weeks to a couple of months, depending on the size of the loan and documentation requested. Once it goes through a preliminary process of looking at the loan and making sure you got all the documents, then it has to go through underwriting. And so that takes time. We just have to wait for the bank to give us our up or down or any additional information. Once approved, funding for small loans can be immediate. You just needed $150. I mean, excuse me, 150,000. They're going to give it to you immediately. But large loans, say 1.2 million, are given to you as a draw. They're not going to just throw out 1.2 million and you instantly start paying interest on that either. You will get that as the work is performed. So say you had roofing and then you got some siding. So as these expenses come through, we submit a request to fund the expense and we can pay. The vendors know this was the way it works. We usually don't have a problem. They're not going to ask for money ahead. And payments are set up on auto drafts automatically out of the bank account, out of the operating account. All right, next one. Closing cost. This is not free. The closing cost depends on the loan amount and type. It can be anywhere from $500 from a quick loan up to 0.2% of the loan amount. And Heritage also has a loan processing fee for going out and sourcing the loan for you and getting the information to the banks and everything that is needed, so that you don't have to do anything but just sign and make some decisions on how you want to fund the loan payments. All right, that's me. Questions? It was kind of a short presentation. There's a lot of different scenarios, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody individually. We can set up a Teams meeting or meeting particularly, but just as a quick recap, your delinquencies are going to be the big key onto whether you can get a loan or not.
And I think, Sharon, you pointed out some really great things that a lot of us as managers and as board members kind of traverse. These are all really great questions that we need to be mindful of. I think there's a lot of key points. I really like the checklist that you created that kind of shows what are the things that the bank's going to ask for. I know I've gone through a loan process before from, the very beginning of doing the discussion with the board, to having to schedule the meeting, to working with the bank. It can be, this was something that you pointed out, it can be a bit of a process. For some loans, this can take up to 2 or 3 months, depending on the types of documents that are requested. And just as Sharon had also noted on that checklist, you also need to provide those bids and proposals that she was talking about. So it's not enough to just ask for the money. You have to prove what that money is being used for, kind of almost like in tandem with what you would do with updating your reserve study or getting a brand new reserve study. So for associations who have ever gone through doing a reserve study, it's kind of similar, with obviously some variable differences here. So Sharon had mentioned in her presentation a great little PDF that we're also going to send out to everybody that has registered for the event this evening. It's a 2-pager. As you're seeing right now on your screen, these are the cost saving initiatives. So these are some things that, going in tandem with our last class, which was the reserve study and doing all of your budget, preparing for this upcoming year and the future years, which may include having to do special assessments, which may include having to get a loan. And just as Sharon mentioned, you really can only do that if you have minimal delinquency. So something to be very, very mindful of here. So in order for us to be able to be helpful to you, here are some other ways that you as an association can look at finding ways to cut costs. Obviously, we're living in a day and age where the cost of goods and services just keep going up year over year. We're having challenges with rising costs really in every category, but traditionally, consistently in the cost of materials for goods and services like decks or windows or roofing shingles, those types of things. And so I think it's really important to, and insurance too, for a lot of you associations, you're still seeing pretty hefty year over year increases for insurance. So those are things that oftentimes you can't really offset. Obviously, you want to get the correct proposals. You want to make sure that your RFPs are what they should be so that you are eliciting back the best scopes of services for you as the board of directors to be able to compare when approving works to be done. So here are some things, could you, do an energy audit if you're a condominium building? This might be something that is beneficial for you. Definitely utilizing, believe it or not, if you are a self-managed association, you should still be utilizing some sort of administrative software that helps you do your life a little bit easier. Optimizing vendor contracts. This kind of goes in parallel with what we were talking about. Something to be mindful of, boards. You want to make sure that you maintain a really good vendor relationship with your partners. So, perform your due diligence and your contract negotiations or your rebidding as necessary. Oftentimes we do see new boards, we have elections, every year or every 2 years, and those new boards want to go ahead and issue out RFPs so that they can solicit new vendors every year or every 2 years. If that has value for your association because you're not getting the service that you need or that you deserve for your community, we completely agree with that thought process. However, if it's not broke, don't try and fix it. Meaning your association has a reputation. And if you go through a lot of vendors, you are going to unfortunately potentially put your association at risk from being able to sustain some really good partnerships. So again, when it's necessary, we definitely want you to make sure that you're negotiating your vendor contracts and utilizing those relationships to the best of your ability whenever possible. But again, if you're happy with the services, if you have a contract for maintenance, if you have a contract for your landscaper, then those are the types of services that you want to make sure that you can keep warranted and that you're not, doing a rollover circumstance all the time. Preventative maintenance, regular inspections, and this can look like a lot of different things, whether that's you as the homeowner that lives on site that can see visual things, whether that's having a particular professional that does visual inspections as part of their scope of service, whether that's your management company that's coming out to help you. When they're out doing their compliance inspections, they're also looking at the common areas of the association and making sure the risk assessment or the maintenance needs are being met there. That's really what that talks about right here. Waste reduction, this is going to depend, again, for your association, and what your requirements are based on the municipality in which you live. You might have options, you may not have options, but for those of you that do have options, it's always really great to consider what you can do for some of your recyclables or your trash practices throughout the association as a whole. And then lastly, we need to make sure that you are engaging your homeowners. We love when board members attend all of our classes. That's great. That's what we do this for. But these are also made available for your homeowners. These are not solely focused on board members. We want to make sure that you have the access to share this information with people that live in your neighborhood, because ultimately, one, we want them to feel involved, but two, we want them to also feel involved enough to want to volunteer. So we want there to be a balance. We want there to be good knowledge that's shared, and we want people to feel like they're included. All right, on the next page is, I think, a little bit more uncommon, so to speak. This is the revenue generating portion as soon as we get to that. But this next page is going to talk about ways in which an association can kind of a little bit out of the box think about making some money or potentially finding additional ways. It did not. Unfortunately, I think we're having some technical difficulties and the computer screen froze, but it will change here in a second, and we'll talk about the revenue generating portion. But in this particular section that we're going to talk about, one of the biggest things that I want to do is point out that you definitely are going to want to make sure that you get your attorney involved in a lot of these. As Sharon talked about in one of her slides, we do not generate revenue from bake sales. Although no. I think that might be a little fun to do from time to time. And I do think, being able to have a place where goods and services could be made available for people to purchase, that just has to coincide with what your association's governing documents allow you to be able to do. So just like how governing documents may prohibit or have some things with leasing, this can also be the same circumstance that you may find for some of these different additional revenue generating circumstances that we're going to talk about. So some of those things, again, like we said, are a little bit more out of the box. And while we're getting ready to bring this on screen, I'm just going to talk about them really fast because I can see them. This is one that may not sound uncommon, but might be a little bit. We are in the great state of Georgia where there is a lot of film production that happens. And so we do know that from time to time, we get contacted by production companies often about wanting to film part of their movie within a community association potentially. And we think those are really neat offers. Obviously, when it works for all parties, that's fantastic. Something to keep in mind, board. We talk about this with managers when this does come up. What's the parking going to be like? What's the type of production equipment that's going to be on site potentially? What is going to be the trade-off? Are they going to be looking to improve some of your common area elements? Are they going to, beautify the front entrance because they're going to have to park certain things? So again, this is where your association's attorney really needs to be heavily involved with this particular process as well, so that they can negotiate the best contract terms for the association and for the production crew and the film. If that works out for you, There's a lot of filming opportunities that happen often. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about here, there are some great databases where you can actually register your association if you wanted to. You don't have to, but I'm just putting it out there. Some of those production crews are going to find you if they really like your spot, or if they're looking for a particular aesthetic that might be really important to the production. So just something to keep in mind. And it's great if you do find yourself on those sites, highlight the unique features of your community. What would actually draw attention to have a film crew want to do a production at your community? So just fun things to think about. The next one, you may have heard us talk about this before, but broadband marketing initiatives. This is where we're talking about if you're an association that is a gated community sometimes, or maybe owns the air rights of the land in which where you are, and said land rights have maybe internet or cable that runs through them. This is what a broadband agreement or exclusive marketing agreement might be able to provide your association with you essentially getting a piece of their ability to run their lines and utilize or market specifically to your neighbors and yourself, or potentially just have access to have their equipment on your property. So there's a lot of things that broadband can also do. Sharon can attest to this. Sometimes boards get a little skeptical when it comes to the broadband agreements, because the money that you as an association can earn from that is sometimes a little off-putting. But as a gentle reminder, I will say we do everything to help vet the process and stand by with the vendor during the negotiation and so forth. The board is going to be abreast of the circumstance. But something to remember, if in this particular scenario, if you are receiving income for the association from a broadband agreement, you are going to have to pay taxes on that, which is different from assessment income being non-taxable. You don't pay taxes on homeowner assessments or special assessments. But if it's additional income that is not assessment income, that is also something that if you do enter into some of these agreements where you are getting dollars in exchange for, the service that you're providing, or whatever you're entering into an agreement with, something to be mindful of, especially if you're self-managed. You've got to set aside some of that money, because you will be paying Uncle Sam when you file your taxes that following year. So just something to be mindful of. Renting common area spaces, this is what we're talking about, event spaces or storage units. No pun intended, but maybe a bake sale could potentially happen. Maybe you're doing, maybe you're doing a fun little, work fair or something where you're having, local artists come in and sell some of their items, and they can rent that space from you, and the association, instead of renting their clubhouse out to an individual homeowner, can rent it out for this particular program. Again, giant asterisks all over the place. You've got to see if your governing documents even allow that to be something that you can even promote. Most don't, unfortunately. However, there might be a few, or there might be some things that you can do for one-off circumstances that might present themselves in those certain advantage points. But we've seen people do car washes and all kinds of fun things that might be helpful in those circumstances. So advertising opportunities are probably the largest thing that we see for associations, other than broadband, to create additional revenue sources outside of the ownership, right? Because really that's what these are. These are things that are outside of assessment income. Okay. So sometimes we see digital signs. You might be driving on 85, you might be driving on 400, and you might see some signs on top of a building. That could be a residential building where the association is potentially getting a percentage of a monthly marketing fee for that. which is something that's great. Again, just like with all other revenues that are not homeowner assessments, it will be taxable, meaning you will pay taxes on those. Sometimes our larger associations love to do newsletters, and in their newsletters, they do advertisements in there, and certain local businesses can choose to pay to advertise in their newsletters. That could also be a way to generate revenue or additional income. Oftentimes I see that just pays for that particular newsletter and that broadcast to be able to be printed. However, if it does make the association a little bit of money, that's also awesome. Or maybe it helps to offset some of your social activities or something of that accord for the association. The next thing, oh, look, we've got it up on the screen. I love it. The next thing that we've got, again, are community events. And this kind of goes in line with renting out the common areas a little bit. You know, maybe you can do a fundraiser event. Again, sometimes you can't based on your governing documents, or workshops and classes. So it'd be so great. I know a lot of our lifestyle associations offer this just to their ownership in general. But for those of you that are not set up like some of our active communities, maybe you have a sip and stroke type evening where 30 people come in and pay to drink wine and or whatever beverage of their choice, and paint a picture for the evening. That could be something that you could potentially do. And then lastly, partnering with other local businesses. What are ways that you can leverage some of the spaces that maybe, this is where I was talking about, having a mobile pet grooming service come, once a month, and they can park for an exclusive a period of time and have access for your homeowners to be able to use their goods and services. So again, these are out of the box thinking. They're not going to be applicable to every association, unfortunately, but hopefully this kind of just stimulates some thought process of these are some additional ways that oftentimes we're asked, hey, how can we make more money and not increase assessments or not create a special assessment? Now, not all of these are obviously going to be able to fund large projects, but I will say sometimes those broadband marketing agreements and sometimes the advertising spaces absolutely are lucrative enough to be able to help with some of, maybe a project that you've got coming up within the next year or so. So just something to think about. Again, the sun, the moon, and the stars have to align for an association to be able to do that. And if your community manager, if you're partnered with professional management or with Heritage, if your community manager is coming to you with some of these things like a broadband agreement, we promise these are legit and viable solutions for your association. And we would hate for you to leave good money on the table. So definitely explore those if they are in the best interest of the association. And we sincerely thank everybody for joining us this evening. I know we did not have a lot of questions this evening, but there was a lot of content that we offered and a lot of content that we covered as we went through the communication. Just as Sharon said, everybody's going to go ahead and get a copy of the slides from this evening and, of course, the initiatives that we just reviewed. And we sincerely thank you to everybody who's joined us and who's participated with us. And we look forward to seeing you in the audience again real soon.